Almost immediately after students and faculty at the University of Missouri were able to get the president, Tim Wolfe, and the Chancellor, Bowen Loftin, to resign over concerns about a structural, systemic, historic series of racial attacks and a permissive attitude for racism at the university. We then had a series of threats, racial intimidation sweeping across the campus in a variety of different forms, leading many students to not want to go to class today, feeling like it wouldn't be safe to. There were threats of violence, threats of murder, in fact. We're going to cover some of those right now. Now, a man has already been arrested after sending out this yak. I'm going to stand my ground tomorrow and shoot every black person I see. And very reasonably, the response, whoa, dude. That's one response. Thankfully, this spread rapidly. It was spread all over the campus. And eventually they were able to track down the student. Now, the student was not near the university, was not a student of the university. It was Hunter Park of the Missouri University of Science and Technology. He is now in custody, a 19-year-old. No weapons were found. And the university is quick to play up the fact that the threats of violence are primarily coming from people who aren't actually at the university. There is more to it. But what do you all think about this? About the possibility of, I think it's reasonable that the students don't feel safe going to class.
I think it's beyond reasonable that the students don't feel safe in class. It doesn't seem like the school is doing enough to protect them. Honestly, if there was some sort of, God forbid, mass shooting or something, I don't know how the administrators would feel because they're getting these very clear threats. No one's saying, I feel like doing this to the school. They're saying, I am going to go shoot up the school. And they still haven't canceled classes, which I think is a very risky move by the administrators. Yeah. Now, with that said, nothing proves the protesters right like these people making the threats, right? These are the people who will make the argument that we've overcome our race issues. And at the same time, they go ahead and they make these terrible threats against the black students. The worst part about all of this, in my opinion, is that the person who got caught was 19 years old. We're in 2015, and we're now, or not now, but we're still living in a country where teenagers are still spewing this type of hatred against minorities. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, that you could grow up, he was 4 or 5 years old when 9/11 happened. Like that's how young this person is. They've lived in this world that it seems like we've evolved, we've progressed, we've moved a lot in the past couple of decades, but to still harbor these sorts of thoughts and to feel emboldened by the anonymity, the perceived anonymity, thankfully they were able to track him down, of being online it's crazy. Yeah. And by the way, in terms of the threats of violence, obviously we have a lot of school shootings, university-specific shootings in this country every year, every month, every week generally. Specifically in the South right now, specifically in Missouri, I mean, we just heard about the FBI breaking up the group of white supremacists who said they were going to go and shoot up a series of black churches to start a race war. Okay, that was their original plan. If they were still out there, the idea that they might then move to this hotbed of racial discourse going on right now about this protest, that is not a crazy position to hold. Yeah. And so I think, again, it's entirely reasonable for the students to not feel like they should have to go to class. I had several screenshots of emails sent to me by people who said that they were students at the university at least, where they were communicating with their professors, and the professors saying, well, yeah, you're not going to be there tomorrow for the test, but the test is going to happen anyway. We can't, of course, confirm that those are real, but I think that you need to err on the side of reassuring the students that you have their backs right now.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I agree with you. The administration have clearly let the students down. And what I thought was interesting about this whole story was the fact that it took the football team to actually bring around change. You had a kid who was on hunger strike.
Right.
You had the faculty threatening a 2-day walkout. And it wasn't until the football team actually said that we're not going to play and there's going to be a financial implication or financial consequence to that because they weren't going to play Brigham Young and it was going to cost $1 million.
Right.
And it wasn't until it was galvanized. And now it's laudable that the football team has that kind of power. But at the same time, it does indicate to me the impotency of students. And that's kind of echoing what you're saying in terms of the faculty not really, or not really the faculty, I couldn't necessarily blame them, but the administration, shall we say. And also, Anna, just to pick up on something else that you were talking about in terms of security, this isn't the first lapse that they've had at the university. They've had 2 other instances this year. One that there was a shooting in the garage, and it took them half an hour to respond.
It's incredible.
So there's been a series of incidents that have kind of foreshadowed this.
So the big criticism by the protesters was that the administrators weren't doing enough to protect the black students from some of the racial harassment that they were facing. And the administrators are doing a great job in proving the protesters right because now they're refusing to take the appropriate measures to keep these students safe.
Yeah.
So
They're demonstrating the point very well.
Very well, exactly.
Right before our eyes. And we've seen, obviously, so there's that violence. In Texas, there have been bleach bombs thrown at minority students, nooses put around statues. Like, for some reason, this seems to be the year of this racial conflict on university campuses. And really fast, I don't want to give the impression that all of the faculty is doing the wrong thing just because a couple have refused to cancel their classes. Obviously, as we pointed out, they were willing to do the walkout. A lot of the faculty are doing the right thing. And overall, the administration is, to some extent, at least reacting well in the fact that they got rid of the president and the chancellor.
Right.
Which is one of the short-term goals of the protest movement.
That's the short-term goal, but that obviously doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
The reason why they got rid of them is because of their inaction, and now you have to deal with the core of the issue, and that's the racial harassment that still exists on that campus.
Right, and is implicitly condoned, or has been implicitly condoned up until this point. And actually addressing that's a long struggle. The kind of grand gesture of resignation, oh, okay, I've fallen on my sword, that's, I don't want to say it's an empty gesture, but it's the beginning of the process.
Yes, very beginning, absolutely.
Yeah, and it looks like it's going to, the administration has to do what they can, obviously, but they have to do something to help educate or move the students who are on the wrong side of this, who are apparently just eager, hungry to get involved in these racial back and forths. I mean, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here, that yak that we showed you was not the only threat. There were many. Some of these are unconfirmed at this point, but this was being widely spread through social media all throughout last night's debate. I was getting tweets about this. Students reported via Twitter that a group of men with bandanas over their faces was walking around yelling racial slurs, while others were driving a pickup truck around and harassing black students. Apparently they were chanting white power at one point. There were also reports that the KKK was gathering near the campus, though the university said they could find no evidence that the white supremacist group was on campus. So a number of different potential threats. Students feel like they're being not just harassed, but violently, like there are altercations, people being penned into small areas before being released. We had a number of students talking about that. And so it's a scary time there. I mean, and
it's less or not less. It's about 100 miles from Ferguson as well. And I don't just sort of throw that in, casually. I think there was a significance to that as well. And there's indication a lot of the students were galvanized by the Black Lives Movement. But I think that's significant as a litmus test for the debate that is raging in this country.
Yeah, and I think the debate is raging because technology has made our racial issues much more transparent. I used to think that racism existed in a very covert way. I didn't realize that there's overt racism and people have been dealing with it for a long time, but it just wasn't available for us to see until people started filming cops on their smartphones and putting it up on the internet and showing these very clear instances of brutality used against minority groups and racial discrimination used as a reason for not hiring certain people or discriminating against certain people. We're seeing this more and more. I think the internet and technology has made it much more easy to identify it and to see it. And there are certain communities that were giving it a pass, thinking that it's okay to treat people this way and that, as long as you don't say anything about it, you don't stir the pot, it's going to be fine. Yeah. But then once people start speaking out about it, that's when the debate starts firing up the way it's been lately.